Hello everybody, it's KhalifPVP bringing another Guild Wars 2 video. This time I'm going to talk about a new Revenant World vs. World somewhat meta build. So this one's very similar to my previous one posted here. The only difference is this is a little bit more tanky and gives a little bit more survivability. The reason we did this switch to the new, the new meta is largely because the prevalence of Kandi Necros. So if you're running with Kandi Necros, the power and the crit that you were getting from your buffs was not that useful, and instead you were kind of better off supplementing it with kind of more survivability to your teammates. The other big reason being that, again, with the Kandi Necros and Kandi being somewhat more and more popular, the buffs you were getting fighting against those people were not really helpful, whereas we needed a little bit more damage mitigation and a little bit more survivability to outlast the boatloads of Kandis that you were getting. So just as a refresher, the previous one called for Malix and your glint stances, and with glint we were really just pulsing both Facet of Darkness as well as Facet of Elements. Now the issue what I meant was, you're not really getting any benefit out of it, was because there's so much Kandis, majority of the time you were in demon stance just popping pain absorption to kind of rid your teammates of the Kandis and kind of chilling in the back line, so to speak, so that you can't be targeted for a corruption bomb. So with that, I saw that we were not really using our dragon stance as much. You have your Facet of Darkness that ticks for about 3.5 seconds, 4 seconds, depending on what your teammates have, if they have the boon duration increase. And then, the Facet of Elements, as good as it is, you really weren't ticking it as much as your Facet of Darkness. You're popping that off to get those Kandis out as fast as possible. So for this reason, Facet of Darkness, I really was not getting any sort of, it's 3 seconds, and really there was nothing for me here to kind of do a quick dump of my energy. So with that being said, one of the things we did was switch over glint to legendary dwarf stance, and the reason we pick up dwarf stance is kind of somewhat twofold. The biggest reason is you get Rite of the Great Dwarf that you can pop off at 50 energy, which is essentially anytime you switch your stance, you're gonna get 50 energy. And the other one being your Soothing Stone, which is heal yourself and remove conditions, which synergizes really well with Malix's kind of pain absorption, which is, absorb all the conditions that your teammates have. So essentially what you would do is you would go through your rotations, grab all your Kandis, switch over to legendary dwarf stance, which will give you your Rite of the Great Dwarf, pop that so your teammates kind of get a buffer of damage, and then Soothing Stone to not only heal yourself but also remove all your conditions. Now that I explained the generic gist of the build, I will run through the specializations. It's, again, very similar to the old specialization. You have Retribution right down the middle, and we're picking up close quarters. Foes that are striking from further away is going to deal less damage. And the reason, again, we pick this up is if you're fighting a lot of Kandi teams, Kandi blobs, Kandi Zergs, you want to kind of sit towards the back so they don't target you and Kandi bomb the shit out of your whole entire team, because with Malix you're going to be pulling a lot of those Kandis. And then retaliation, anytime you evade retaliation. The reason we really pick this up is we don't really have anything too much that's useful in the other two options. And then finally, Versed in Stone, chance to gain Rite of the Great Dwarf, again the one that we have whenever you're struck. So the biggest difference in this build is the fact that we switched out Corruption for Invocation, largely because Invocation was heavily based on our Fury, and we're not really going to get that much Fury on this build. Instead, we're going to be really concerned about getting a lot of Kandis onto ourselves, just spamming pain absorption. So for that reason, we're going to get up Replenishing Despair. Anytime you get Kandis, you're going to get a small amount of healing. It's not much, but it is pretty much the only useful one here. The other one, you're really not going to apply Torment as much. You're not going to be using Demon's Embrace or anything like that. Legendary, your Demonic Defiance. Again, you're only really going to be spamming Pain Absorption anyway, so you already get resistance, so not really useful. So replenishing despair is kind of the only one left over. Same thing for your second trait line. Bolstering Anguish is good because it increases your damage, but it's not really as good as this one, where you can essentially strip somebody's boons, and that's a huge win, especially if somebody's running, let's say, Torment, or somebody's running a lot of Power or Fury. You can easily strip that out, so they're not doing as much damage. The next up, on the third line, is you're going to pick up Pulsating Pestilence, and the reason we like this one is you're going to be switching your stances a lot, and so you're going to be copying your Kandis to your opponents as much as possible. Now, keep in mind, if you're going against a Kandi build, you're probably going to be sitting in the back line because you're going to have a shit ton of Kandis, and you don't want to be bombed for your Kandis. So this is really shines when you're fighting against a power-based build or power-based Zerg. The last one's going to be Glint. Even though we don't run Glint in our stances, we're still going to pick that baby up in the specializations, and the reason is it has fantastic synergy with everything else. So you're going to pick up Radiant Revival, and the reason we like this is I really use it as an extra heal. Pretty much, if I see somebody down, I'll run up to them and I'll try to heal them, and most of the time people attack me and it ends up healing me instead. And the other reason is down allies are death, especially if you're running against a Kandi build, because they're gonna dump all the Kandis on your ally and then just bomb that ally for a huge amount of damage. The next up is Shared Empowerment. When you apply a boon to an ally, you apply Might as well. You're going to be applying Resistance as well as a couple other ones here. Inspiring Reinforcements, and there's a couple others that are out there that you apply. And then finally, increase damage per boon on you. Now, you personally aren't going to be putting up a lot of boons on yourself, but your other allies, if you're running it with a Zerg, should be putting a good amount of boons, a lot of Might, a lot of Fury, etc. So you should be getting a decent benefit from it. And the other reason is the other two skills really aren't that good. The other one, Crystal Hibernation, this looks really good until you realize this locks you in place. I used to run with this one, but what would happen is I would drop below 25%. Usually it's because we're getting overrun and we need to retreat, and the skill would trigger, and all of a sudden I would be stuck in place and just get overrun. So I really did not like this skill at all. And then the other one, your Stability Applied, it's so minor. Getting extra stack, it just is not worth it. So for that reason, going with Elder's Force is essentially the best thing to do. The equipment's pretty straightforward. Run with Marauders with a power position rune added, so you can do some extra damage. And the two weapons are a hammer and a staff. So folks, that wraps up our video. If you do like the video, please do like and subscribe. I'll be doing one more Revenant guide for World vs. World, the healing one. And so until next time, this is KhalifPVP. Peace.